residence to the Dr. DC podcast. My name is producer Richard, and across from me is the Doctor himself.
Hello.
Each week we talk about the weird and wonderful world of DC while fielding questions from listeners like you.
Yeah.
This is a very special episode.
So excited. We've got a special guest, writer, comic creator.
A very recent. Is he on Batman right now?
About to be on
Batman.
Detective Comics.
That's right.
Ram V. We're just waiting for him to join us right now. We've been
and I will be here the whole time.
We've been really excited for this. Oh, actually, you know what? Just before he gets here, can I ask you to drive to another town for something?
Oh, sure, I could do that. Yeah, I can make that work.
Yeah, if you don't mind doing that.
Yeah, all right, that's fine. I can't imagine.
I mean, it'll be quick.
Yeah,
you'll be back by the time he gets here.
Yeah, 4-hour drive. That should be fine.
Yeah, that's fine. I think I told him 4 hours from now. We're just always this prepared.
We always start.
We were going to just vamp for 4 hours. That's a special treat for.
But instead, you're going to do it alone.
We'll just edit out the bits for...
No. You're going to do it alone for 4 hours.
All right, here we go. Hacha!
That's right. This episode is featuring Ram V. I'm very, very excited for this. Why don't we just get right into it? No.
You're the one that said you said the Ghostfacers line.
Yeah, it's my fault. Sorry.
Writer, comic creator, Ram V.
Hey, thanks for having me on here.
Thank you so much for making the time for this. We've been trying to speak to more and more comic creators, and you're definitely one that was near the top of the list. And part of that, at least for me, is because I've become a real fan of the sort of dark and creepy side of DC, the magic, the Justice League Dark, the mysteries,
sure.
And that. Obviously, that's a lot of your work there. But is that the stuff that got you into comics? What was sort of your in?
Yeah, I mean, you could say that. I suppose it was probably sort of the late 80s, early 90s era of Vertigo that got me into comics. So a lot of that is the kind of magic, horror, creepy, weird stuff.
Right.
Specifically Sandman kind of brought me into comics, really. And it was from there that I kind of followed Gaiman, Morrison, Moore, Ennis, Ellis, all those guys. But I think Ellis is a bit of a different vibe from the usual magic stuff. And then it was also probably Brian Azzarello's work on 100 Bullets that was quite influential on the way I did things. A little bit of Darwin Cook here and there.
Sure.
But yeah, so I don't know if that gives you a vicinity of the kind of stuff that brought me into comics. Yeah,
totally. I mean, there's always this interesting thing too, where there's sort of comic influences because that's a very specific medium. But what sort of was that? What got you into writing, or were there other kind of maybe more prose or other types of things that got you into writing first, and then the love of comics kind of blends in?
Yeah, actually, I wanted to be a storyteller. I think from as far back as I can remember. I used to get in trouble for fibbing a lot, but there were never lies like, oh, I was delayed because my dog ate my homework or something like that. It was always I met an alien on my way to school, and so from that sort of very young age, I had an inclination towards making stuff up.
Right.
And then I think it was reading Lord of the Rings when I was about 12 or 13 that really got me thinking about writing. I remember writing a terrible 40,000 word replica, poorly made replica of Lord of the Rings.
Whoa.
As a 12-year-old. Which would have been novella sized, really, if you think about it. But yeah, so I've been writing since I was a kid, really, and predominantly the only thing that I knew I could do was write prose and short stories. And I had a few of those published before I started thinking about writing comics professionally, which was, fast forward 2012. I had studied and worked as a chemical engineer for a while, but I'd been writing pretty much as a hobby all the time.
Right.
And then I had a few things published. 2012, I quit chemical engineering and I decided I was going to write full time. And then 2013, I think a friend of mine was like, you spent 7 years studying engineering, which is not something you wanted to do. Why don't you spend a couple of years studying writing?
Right.
And so I moved over to the UK to study creative writing for a couple of years, which I did. And it was kind of during that time that I really started taking comics writing seriously. I wrote my first graphic novel at the end of that creative writing course. And that was kind of my window into making comics professionally.
That's awesome. I mean, it's interesting, the detours.
Sure.
I studied theater, but I've got lots of people that I ended up meeting in that sphere had a similar path where they started like in computers or science or something like that, and then they went back later to follow the artistic passion more.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask you this question because the other creators that we've talked to have all kind of reinforced this idea that every time somebody finds a way to break into comics, they wall it up behind them, because there seems to be a bunch of different stories of how they got in or which piece fell where or who they met at which con or anything like that. So what was your kind of breakthrough point into doing this professionally, making that like your career? You talked about how you wrote a graphic novel at the end of your school. What got you into the publishing and making that a career?
Sure. So just to go back to your previous point about creators breaking in and walling it in, I think it seems that way, or a lot of that advice kind of falls into that category because people tend to give you advice that has nothing to do with writing or the work.
Sure.
It's always, oh yeah, you should go meet editors, or you should, email everyone 100 times or whatever. But the beauty of any creative field is if you really focus on the work, you don't have to do any of that other stuff too much.
Sure. Yeah.
And so my story is very simple in that I made a graphic novel with no intention of getting into the industry or being published. I mean, sure, I had all those ambitions and dreams, but I made a graphic novel because I wanted to make a really good graphic novel, not because I wanted to break in.
Sure.
And it was really that book that kind of opened a lot of doors for me. I remember 2015 was the first time I went to a comic book convention outside of a couple that I'd been to in India. And this was Thought Bubble. And it was around the time I was just starting to put this graphic novel together. Self-published it by a Kickstarter. So it was a kind of made hardcover in 2016. It was the first time I said, okay, now I'm going to get a table at this convention.
Right. Yeah.
That convention was really a nice opportunity to meet people like Kieran Gillen and people like Dan Waters, Casper Wingard, all of these guys I know quite well now, and some of them are part of the studio with me. So it was kind of having that sort of creative group of people at various points in their careers around you that was quite useful.
Right.
It was at that convention that I met Jamie Rich, who was editor at Vertigo at the time. And I handed him a copy of Black Mamba. That made my life a lot easier because I'm not very confident about going to people and just being like, hey, hi, I'm so-and-so. Whereas it's a lot easier if you go, hi, I'm Ram. I made a book. Here's the book.
Sure.
And then I don't have to do any of the talking because all of my work is in the book.
Right.
As a case in point for that, I met Shelley Bond, who was tabling at Thought Bubble at the time, and she was doing portfolio reviews. And I hadn't managed to get into the sort of group of people who had their portfolios reviewed. So I went to her table afterwards And I said, hey, I don't have a portfolio, but I have a comic book if you wanted to have a look at it. And she was like, oh, look, I'm too tired. I'm not looking at any more comics today.
Sure.
So I just left it at her table with my card inside. I said, look, if you pick it up on your way home, great. If not, too bad. She did. Jamie Rich read Black Mamba a year after I gave it to him.
Sure.
And offered me my first DC work. Shelley Bond read Black Mamba in the 3 months after she picked it up from her table.
Right.
And she emailed me saying that, hey, we should work together. So the secret to breaking in is to focus on doing good work.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it sounds like it should be intuitive.
Yeah. I mean, but I also think that because writing and creative work are such intangible things, invariably, if you ask people for advice about how to do well in a creative field, you get advice around the presumption that your work is good enough. Right. But then if 100 people wanted to break in and all of their work was good enough, then we would be in the golden era of making creative things, Sure, yeah. So the key is to be probably in the 3 or 4 or 5 out of 100 that will get their work picked up because they're that good. Right. So my ambition then and my ambition now has always been to, can I produce interesting, unique, evocative work? Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, that feels like the right place to come from with that too. Even just for your own. And if you think about it, like no one can wall that up. If you make work that is amazing, no one can wall that up because good work shines through all of the stuff that people put in between. Totally. All of that gatekeeping stuff goes away because the work is brilliant. Right. Yeah. No, that makes a ton of sense. We got lots of questions from listeners and people that are fans of yours. We won't have time for all of them, but I thought maybe we'd jump in because I think there's some questions that probably speak to some of the stuff we're already talking about. That'd be a good way to jump in. So we got a question on Twitter from Chad Bokelman, who writes, from Swamp Thing to Justice League Dark to Lila Starr, Radio Apocalypse, Blue and Green, you continue to create vibrancy within the dark corners you put your characters in. So what continues to draw you to the dark side for each successive creative sojourn? I mean, probably some kind of natural inclination / fascination, if you will. Sure. I remember having a conversation very on with Kieran Gillen, and we were talking about happy endings in stories. And Kieran was like, I can never do a happy ending in a story. The most I can do is bittersweet. Sure. And so if that gives you a sense of where my answer is going, I don't know how to write something that doesn't have some kind of shadow or pall sitting over it. Right. I don't know what that says about me as a person. Maybe there's a little bit of nihilism there somewhere. Maybe there's some existential dread, but no, I've always written stories, even my most sort of upbeat stories, if you will, which I think Layla Starr certainly falls into that category, or Graffiti's Wall certainly falls into that category. Those are both still had kind of elements of the macabre, elements of darkness to them. Right. Well, I mean, but I don't know how to write anything else. The Magic Corner feels. I mean, I can only really speak to DC. That's really what I read a ton of. But the Magic Corner feels like it fits that because there's a sort of ongoing theme all the way back through like the Moore Swamp Thing and all these other runs of like cost and consequence, right? That like when you're using magic, you're trading something, right? And I feel like that comes up in your Justice League Dark, in the Swamp Thing. There's an element of what do you trade in accessing those powers, right? Sure. And I think that that's a common theme across anything I would write. Sure. Is I don't think it makes for interesting characters if there are characters who can use their abilities, use their powers. And I don't just mean superpowers. I mean, who can sort of impact the story in some way that is beyond human,
right,
and not have it cost them in some way.
Sure.
Like even if I was writing a Superman story, that would be a recurring theme in that as well. So it's not necessarily that has anything to do with magic. It's just that, choices have consequences.
Yeah.
And especially when the volume on your choices is turned up to 15,
right,
then the volume on your consequences is turned up to 15.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Okay, we've got a sort of maybe kind of riffing right off that. We got a question from Edward Kane, who writes, is it difficult for you writing in the voices of DC characters? Is there one that's proven really challenging?
No, not really. I don't necessarily go around looking for characters' voices.
Right.
Sometimes I do, because sometimes I'm trying to riff off of what has come before.
Sure.
Certainly with the Swamp Thing stuff, I wanted the cadence to feel like it was an evolution of Moore's choice to write Swamp Thing in that way.
Right.
And so I think it certainly holds true there. But outside of that, I like making that stuff up.
Sure. Yeah.
I think my Etrigan in JLD is a particularly enjoyable voice that I don't think he's been written that way anywhere.
Sure.
At least not with that kind of level of couplet rhyming that we've seen.
Right.
So I don't necessarily try to replicate voices. I try to create voices for my characters, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it totally does. I mean, for people listening, or even for me, who maybe don't really know how this kind of stuff works when it comes to these big sort of ongoing serialized sort of characters.
Yeah.
There's obviously, there must be some form of Bible, but it seems to be relatively flexible. You know what I mean? Or maybe it's more flexible when the character isn't Batman or something like that. When you come on for a Justice League Dark, do they hand you a and this is what the characters are like kind of thing?
Not really.
No.
I don't think there's such a Bible.
Right.
Obviously, there's all of the stuff that came before,
Sure.
and reading that as part of your research, as part of your background is definitely important. But I think, you have to get John Constantine's voice right, because it's a very peculiar, very particular voice.
Right.
And you have to put effort into that. But I don't know that Aquaman, for instance, has a very specific, very particular voice that has been established in any way. Sure. I would even say that of Batman. I don't think Batman has a very specific, very particular voice that has been established in any way, outside of the sort of gruff and Batman kind of thing.
Right. Yeah.
But that's not really a voice. A voice, and I think people kind of misunderstand what voice means with characters as well. It's not the implication of what their voice would sound like or how they would speak, because I think that David Mamet writing a character versus pick Beckett writing a character, or Martin McDonough writing a character. I think you're going to find they can all write the same character, but they will write all those characters very differently.
Sure.
And the cadence might be different, but they will find a voice.
Right.
And so I think the voice has a deeper meaning when it comes to characters talking and dialogue. And in that sense, you could write Batman saying something in 3 different ways and still have it be part of that same sort of cohesive voice, if you will.
Sure. Right. Yeah. It's you could be authentic in multiple styles.
Yeah. And I think voice has more to do with the inner voicings of a character, in that the way, what would they say? What would they choose to say? Not necessarily how would they say it. Whereas with someone like a John Constantine, the how would they say it also becomes a very important, because his sort of Brit origins, his Liverpudlian background,
right,
is very much part of who that character is.
Sure.
If you see what I mean. Whereas
totally.
when you think of Batman, you don't necessarily go like, oh yeah, that Gotham boy right there. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
it's not a marker for that character. There are other things that define that character. Whereas John Constantine is certainly defined by his choice of British slang.
Sure. Yes, of course. Yeah, that's okay. That's awesome. This is a question that came up that I thought was great. I was excited to ask. It's specifically about the Swamp Thing. So this comes from Peeves, who writes, "You've created the most prominent Indian DC character in Levi. Did you intend to create him as the new Swamp Thing, or did you have any other ideas of where he might have been different? How vital are his cultural roots in defining him as the new avatar of the Green?"
Yeah, I mean, I had always pitched this new Swamp Thing as hey, we're going to go to a completely new character, a late 20s person from India, and we're going to confer upon them the powers of a Swamp Thing, if you will,
right.
And examine that. And that was always part of the original pitch. So that answers that part of the question. Second part of the question, I have a more philosophical answer to.
Okay.
In that, I think I don't want to call it a mistake, but I think there is far too often there's an inclination when we say, "Oh, okay, Superman is going to be a Chinese person now," or we say Swamp Thing is going to be an Indian person now. The instinct immediately for everyone is to go like, why? Why do they have to be? So it has to be somehow culturally significant,
sure,
or it has to tie into their mythology. Whereas you wouldn't ever ask that. If I decided to create a new superhero who was from, I don't know, Idaho or something, or
right.
from Ohio or something, you know, you would never say like, oh, what do his like cultural roots from Ohio have to do with his super?
Right.
You would never ask that, and that's part of what I'm trying to get to is, yeah, sure, of course, the cultural background affects things, but it will affect things in nuance and little ways that you shouldn't really notice. You should be looking at the person,
right.
Not that they are from a certain place and therefore all those roots have to be jammed into their character development so that we can justify the fact that they were an Indian who became a superhero, or they were
right.
Chinese who became, and I think that kind of inclination to have to justify that choice is detrimental to creating interesting three-dimensional characters who we love because they're interesting people.
Right. Yeah. I totally agree. I do like it's funny too, in a way, that for a character whose entire thing is that there's a lineage of them, that we really haven't strayed from Alec Holland overly.
Yeah.
Kind of before this series, there's the odd thing here or there, or we see some past ones, or
sure.
But truly, this is the first kind of new version, even though it's a character that's almost like purpose built to pass on, in the way there have been like 6 Dr. Fates or something like that.
Yeah. And I think part of it is comfort, part of it is fear. People look at, you say swamp, everyone, at least if you look at history of writers at DC, they've all hailed from mostly the same place. I'm not sure, but I think the UK has very little swampland to speak of.
Sure.
But again, I'm not sure there were a lot of British writers who came in after Alan Moore to write Swamp Thing either. So I think it's a matter of, comfort. I think it's a matter of being comfortable placing the character somewhere else. And
yeah,
I'd like to think that hopefully, I'm a sign of things to come, in that maybe we'll get a writer from, Kenya one day writing about Swamp Thing, and his Swamp Thing will be from swamps that, are a completely different part of the world.
Yeah.
And I think that leads to very interesting stories. My biggest complaint when I listen to very established writers sometimes say things like, "Oh, there's only 7 really original stories, really, and everything we say is some version of those original 7 or 6." No, that to me is pardon my French, but that's bullshit, because someone somewhere sat and looked at their cultural understanding of their stories and went, okay, there are only 6 original stories. But I guarantee you, they didn't look at African stories. They didn't look at Chinese stories. They didn't look at Indian stories.
Right.
And it's part of the reason why Gaiman's stories tend to be so resonant and they always feel new, is because he's mining other cultures and other backgrounds to find these original stories.
Right.
And I think that's where storytelling will progress to over these coming years, because, we are no longer people of one identity. In fact, we are people of multiple identities, and that's beautiful.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I shouldn't say the goal, because it wasn't everybody's goal, but the objective has really shifted. Instead of like, how do we make everybody the same, regardless of where you come from? It's now, how can we all retain those things that keep us individual and interesting, and our backgrounds, and live alongside each other and work together and collaborate. And
I mean, the answer to me has always been simple, and that is be fascinated, be curious.
Right.
The best way to look at your neighbor and see them as completely different and be okay with that. Not only be okay with that, be happy with it, is go, oh my God, a completely different person that I have no idea how they got here. I need to know. I need to be curious. I need to understand.
Right.
I think the problem is we're taught far too often to either tolerate difference or be intolerant of differences. No one's ever taught to be curious about differences.
Yeah. Be active to seek it out.
Like be excited by finding something that you don't understand.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's very good point. Kind of sad to think about it.
I mean, if you think about storytelling, it's really, to me, stories are that kind of cultural conversation that you're having with people that you don't necessarily know or understand. But when I write a story, right, I'm putting kind of my personal experiences, my background, my culture into it, regardless of when I'm writing, Layla Starr, or I'm writing Batman or Swamp Thing. Sure. There's always a little piece of me in there. And someone who is from Mumbai is going to read it, and potentially someone from Ukraine or someone from China or someone from America is going to read it. And they're all going to find something in there, hopefully, at least if they've enjoyed the story, find something in there that resonates with them. Right. Now, I don't think people understand how incredibly amazing and fascinating that is. That I have never been to Ukraine.
Sure.
But I know there are people there who have read the comics that I've written and have messaged me and gone like, this was amazing. It really touched me. And the fact that we can speak across cultures like that because we are this thing called humanity should be incredibly affirming and beautiful to everyone. And I think that is something I keep in mind when I write my stories, is that my profession is this amazingly brilliant thing that affirms everything that is fantastic about humanity, about being human, about the fact that human beings across from 2 different points on the planet can find something similar in what they have to say / experience.
Yeah, I love that. That's awesome. That's amazing. We got a question kind of on the note of new versions of characters. A question from Instagram from ABC Brooks, who asks, do you have a favorite member of the future State Justice League, and would you like to write those characters again?
I mean, I didn't really write the future State Justice League characters. And I don't have favorite characters. I have favorite stories.
Right.
And so I don't really spend time thinking about whether I would like to write character A or character B. I spend a lot of my time thinking about like, oh, I'd like to tell this story. And it so happens that the story sort of involves a specific character or something. So I don't know how to answer that question. Basically.
No, that's fair. But as a writer then who does some, creator-owned independent stuff and some of this, ongoing serialized work, when you have an idea for a story, what's your process of sorting it into like this is like a my story and its original characters versus I think this is a story that could work in this context?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think stories necessarily arrive or progress in that kind of linear way. It's not like I have a story first, then I go look for a character that fits. Sometimes, I'll get a dead man story in my head.
Right.
Now, regardless of whether I love writing dead man or not, if the story is interesting, then I will love writing dead man. If the story is not interesting, then like there are characters, for instance, that I know nothing outside of their origin story and their power set.
Sure.
But sometimes that's enough for me to go, I could write a story with this power set, which says all of these beautiful, complex things.
Sure. Yeah.
And then it doesn't matter whether, I've read the character before, whether I like the character, I don't. No, then the story, the characters, whatever I make of them when I write the story.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it feels like a good approach because there does, I mean, certainly like as a reader, there is like a tendency with some of these characters to get really bogged down in, I know I'm in this camp. I like a character and I just read them, and sometimes the stories are good and sometimes the stories are bad, and I just keep reading
and
them.
That's perfectly fine to do as a reader.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Like that. I mean, as a reader, there are certainly characters I love and enjoy. Like I've pretty much read, a lot of Swamp Thing. I've read a lot of Batman. I've read a lot of Doctor Strange.
Sure.
And so it's absolutely fine to do that as a reader. But the big sort of danger of approaching stories as a writer like that is then you're only ever going to write a version of the character that already exists.
Sure. Yeah.
Because that's what you read.
Right.
Right. And so you will never create Batman Year One. You will never create New Frontier.
Right.
You will never create trying to find another sort of really cool reinvention like that. But you get my point.
Yeah, totally.
Is that these versions of these characters that we remember, like when people say they love Batman, they don't mean they love Bob Kane, Bill Finger Batman. They mean they love Dennis O'Neil Batman, or they love Frank Miller Batman, because those reinventions were so not from someone who approached writing the character as I'm going to write the character that already exists.
Yes. Right. No, that it makes a ton of sense. It's funny sometimes, just as someone who takes the stuff in, these things feel intuitive, but then, we were having a conversation with some of our listeners this morning about, how do you seek out new books? And a lot of them go by creators. And then it came out that I kind of just go, there are characters I like, and I read them. I might drop a book if I really dislike it or something, but I tend to go by that. That's an absolutely
valid way to do it, though.
Yeah. No, it's that's awesome. Okay, we got some questions from our Discord community. So here we go. This is a question from Bruno. So Bruno asks, These Savage Shores was a phenomenal book that everybody should read. This might be kind of funny coming off the last question, but what specific DC character or comic could you see being around that setting, or maybe even part of the story somehow, but something kind of in that, it's, kind of like 1700s, East India Trading Company sort of era?
I have no idea how to answer that, because
totally.
Because I could write like a 1700s version of pretty much any DC character that I wanted to,
Well,
But I suppose it might be interesting to do like just for sake of spitballing ideas, like a Martian Manhunter 1700 1600 story might be really cool. An alien on the planet in that era might be really cool.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, let's flip that around a little bit. Again, I know you said it's not necessarily like a full story idea just plops down and lands in your lap.
Yeah.
But where did that idea come from? Where did these Savage Shores come from?
Yeah, I mean, this will probably give you a good insight into the way ideas do develop in my head. I had been doing some research on Indian mythology, and I realized that Rakshasas are defined and described in very much the same way as vampires are, in that they live in dark places. They only come out at night. They attack unsuspecting strangers, drink their blood, yada yada. And so part of my brain went like, oh, I wonder what came first. I wonder if someone had written about a vampire first, or someone wrote Rakshasas first.
Right.
And I mean, I kind of knew the answer in that the Indian texts are a lot older.
Sure.
But the first mention of a Rakshas predates the first mention of a vampire in any European literature. Forget Dracula. But
right.
the first sort of origin of the vampire myth is 250 years after the first mention of a Rakshas.
Right.
So it's kind of fascinating. And so put that fact away, filed in some dark corner of my mind.
Yeah.
And then I was watching a TV show called Taboo, with Tom Hardy in it.
Right.
Where they were doing the show about the East India Company, but it's all set in the UK. It's set in London, and Tom Hardy goes away to some exotic African place and comes back with all the kind of weird powers and stuff. And I enjoyed the show, but part of my brain was also like, I wonder, why did they flip that? Why don't we ever get to see like, oh, he went to this specific African place and this is how life was, and
right.
This is the reason he got his powers. And now when he goes back, everything is changed by context. Like even in describing his change, they're only the writers are only interested in how that change impacts them and their own place and their own city and their own culture as they understand it. So part of me was like, okay, what if I did a story where the sort of quintessential white Western traveler comes to exotic place and discovers that the exotic place is like, yeah, okay, dude, I'm not that impressed. You
right.
know? So put that away in another corner.
Sure.
And then come sort of 2018 or 17 or whatever it was, Vault had asked me for 3 pitches, and I sent in 3 pitches. And one of them was this story. And I was like, there's no way someone's going to pick up a vampire story in whatever, 2018 or
sure.
Because, all the glittery diamond, beautiful vampire people were outside having fun. And then they said, yeah, we want to do the story. And, all that sort of amalgam of random ideas that had been thrown together in a pool was suddenly like, okay, now I'm going to pull all of this stuff together to make a story.
So, yeah, it's kind of fun. The idea of there's these little like nuggets and pieces, and they're sort of connected, but it's I guess like any other sort of artistic inspiration, you just have this sort of sum of like knowledge and facts and wisdom and tidbits, and then at some point there's a little spark of, well, I know this thing and I know this thing, and here's where they kind of mesh together, right?
I think there's a reason writers or people in similar creative fields tend to be interesting people, is because there is this kind of inherent need to hoard random facts.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and you hoard enough random facts, and you start seeing patterns within them. And then once you see a pattern clearly enough, you have a story.
It comes back to the curiosity point you were bringing up before, right? You know, part of the process for creating a dynamic story and something that interests you is the fact that you have this kind of curiosity of, you know, which came first, Rakshasa or vampire? And then you seek that out, and then you have that, and you tuck it away. And
I don't know any writers that I enjoy who are not curious.
Sure.
Like you can, and I don't mean this in a way of like colleagues or people, but you know, I've been in a talk with Don DeLillo, the novelist, and you can tell from like 5 minutes of talking to him that this person is just like his brains or neurons are firing in 50 different directions at the same time, and he's thinking about stuff. He's questioning stuff all the time, and I think like I'm inherently that kind of person, and that my personality is one of like, ooh, what's that? It's shiny. So that's kind of where my ideas come from, is kind of pool of just random stuff that's constantly being thrown together.
Yeah, I love that. That's awesome. We got a question from DC Comics columnist Alex Jaffe, who asks, how did Leon Harper become part of your Catwoman run?
I knew that I wanted to have like a protege, a person who is influenced / being trained by Selena,
right?
But not necessarily actively. So someone who just starts following what she does because she's so impressed by Catwoman,
right?
And I had no idea what my plans were going to be for this character, and I started looking up names, and I said, oh, maybe Cheshire Cat is a nice thing to call her.
Right.
And then I realized that, oh, wait, there's already a character called Cheshire. So I read up on Cheshire. And then I read up on her kids and the history of that and what had happened with it. I was like, oh, maybe it might be weird and interesting to do this thing.
Yeah.
So I talked to my editor, and my editor was like, oh, that's kind of cool, because we're all, and this wasn't planned in any way, because she said, we're also doing that with the Fallout post-metal, is that all of these characters can come back because everything happened.
Right.
And so it just seemed to be that sort of, again, random curiosity leading me to a place where I was like, wow, this is kind of perfect and I can execute it.
So I mean, that's interesting too, because it feels like one of those things that, like from the outside, you know, they were already using Roy, you know, Roy was getting kind of, you know, put up for kind of bigger things in Infinite Frontier. It very easily kind of feels like one of those things where they go, and since we're doing that, then we'll do this over here. It's neat that
it's not nearly as coordinated as it looks.
I kind of love that though. It's sort of like there's something kind of,
it's kind of how good stories work. Like I guarantee you, you know, R.R. Martin didn't plan 7 books ahead.
Sure.
That story is written a book at a time, but you read book 6 or book 7 or book 8, and it suddenly feels like everything ties in.
Right.
But that's the skill of the storyteller. And there are some very skilled storytellers working at DC. Yeah. So from the outside, it all looks like, oh, there was a big plan in place. But from the inside, it's more in that people are pushing in similar directions. And so part of your job as a creator, as a writer, is to look for patterns and places where serendipity might happen in interesting ways.
I like that too, because I mean, you know, obviously we're talking about, you know, like not from your perspective necessarily, but we're talking about big corporations, you know, it's like a big business and stuff like that. It's kind of nice to see a real like organic kind of inspiration alive and like moving things forward, that it's nice to have it like reinforced or confirmed that it's not all like calculation or something like that. I like that. I like knowing that, you know.
I think people don't realize that even though they're corporations, you know, people who go into this field, like no one goes in going like, I want to work for a big corporation. Totally. Everyone goes in going like, I want to do crazy, wild stuff. And if you had this kind of mandated structure of what must happen, it takes away all the joy out of making the crazy, wild stuff.
Yeah. And I think there's that misconception out there, because, you know, there's obviously some circumstances or certain things where maybe editorial has to come in and say, we're trying something big, can this tie in or whatever? But I think that,
but even there,
blown up to like they control
can this
everything.
tie in is very different from make this tie-in in this way.
Yes,
Like can this tie-in is creating an opportunity to do something cool.
Right.
And then if you get a good creator in there and they grasp that opportunity and do something that's interesting, that's cool, then that reverberates and resonates, and it feels like it was planned all along. Whereas that's not necessarily true.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Okay, we've got a couple questions left here. We've got one from this one, again, possibly difficult to answer given our conversation, but let's give it a go anyway. This one comes from Crimson Raven, who says, is there a character you would have liked to work into any of the books that you wrote? Or perhaps a more obscure, neglected character you would want to do a series for? Now, obviously, we've talked a lot about where inspiration comes from and things like that. Yeah. But were there any kind of stray thoughts that maybe didn't materialize, say, for, Justice League Dark about certain characters or anything like that?
Well, there was a point where I wanted to involve the Spectre.
Right.
And that was a no-go, unfortunately, because there were big plans for the Spectre elsewhere.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
So that is that's about as much as you'll get on that answer, because I'm also an incurable optimist when it comes to my own stuff. So I go like, oh, okay, I had this idea for this completely obscure, no one's read this character or written this character in 3 decades. When people say, I think it's too obscure, my head hears that as, okay, I'll come back to you in 5 more years when more people have heard of me, so they'll buy the book for me rather than for the character. And so everything I want to do, either I am doing or exists as a pitch somewhere with an editor. So
that's
very unlikely to tell you what characters that I want to work on.
Totally fair. I like that attitude too, right? It's again just tucking pieces away for future use or future ideas.
Yeah, look, if I got a rejection because they were like, no, this is a bad idea, I might put that away. But fortunately, most of my rejections are not, this is a bad idea. They are either we have a better idea from you, or I don't think this character is well known enough. And I guarantee you, like, if someone like a Neil Gaiman said, I wanted to write whatever obscure character, that's not an answer he would get, because people are going to buy that book because it's a Neil Gaiman book, right?
Sure, right.
So maybe not that far, but hopefully one day I'll get to a point where people are buying books because it's a book that I'm involved with. Right. And on that day, I will absolutely go to an editor and go, let me make this obscure character story.
Yeah. I love that. We've got another question. Again, not sure how much you're able to answer some of these, but this one comes from the Marvelous Ryan, who asks, what was the Harley Quinn Poison Ivy special going to be about?
It was going to be about Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy going on a road trip together.
Love that.
Yeah. It was going to be, I pitched it as Into the Wild, but with Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy.
Sure, yeah.
It was going to be very emotional, very grounded, kind of human drama, if you will, and for various reasons that pitch didn't go through, but that's what it would have been, and I can tell you that much without going into the specifics of that.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, it's. Do you ever have I shouldn't say do you ever, has it ever happened where maybe you have a pitch or an idea and it almost goes forward, and then maybe it doesn't at one of the big houses, and then you have kind of repurposed your idea for something indie? Is that a thing that's happened where you're like, I can't sit on this, I have to get it out in some way?
I don't tend to do that, simply because if I went to either DC or Marvel or one of the big publishers like that with a pitch for one of their characters, why would I go to them with a pitch that doesn't center around being about one of their characters, right? Like I'm sure you could pretty much take any superhero story and it could exist in a different format in some way. But I think it loses something. I think there's a charm, there's a joy to writing that superhero story. And if that's not going to happen for some reason, then, there are other stories like.
Right.
My indie projects tend to be stuff that I execute knowing that this is very much an indie project. This is very much something that I am preoccupied with.
Sure.
And is not something that I would necessarily translate. Like, I can't see myself doing Blue and Green as a superhero story.
Sure.
Then why would I see myself doing a superhero story as an indie?
Yeah, and that's fair too. Again, maybe just, maybe it's just one of those kind of like, it's a misperception on certain on my part or on others' parts that sometimes I think my perception of it is like, man, that's a cool story, and then as fans or whatever, the instinct is always to go like, who else would work in a story like this, right? And that's
right.
But when you're creating something organically, especially the way you've described your process, it's so specific. It seems like they're all such like kind of singular ideas that there isn't that. It's not just this is a story and slot someone in. It's built. Yeah. It's purpose built for a character or something like that.
For instance, the Swamp Thing run, it doesn't function as a non-Swamp Thing story.
Right.
At least not in my head. And I think it's very much a case of my choice in terms of what kind of stories I do for my creator-owned work and what kind of stories I do with the superhero stuff. I can definitely see a lot of very good, very popular writers whose indie work and the superhero work, both tend to follow kind of a similar direction.
Right.
But I don't do that.
Sure.
Yeah. My indie work tends to go in like really different, really weird ways.
Yeah. Fair enough. Well, that's awesome. That was our last question that we've got time for. Cool. I just wanted to say thank you again for making time to chat. I think it's so awesome, especially for the people listening. It's nice for me to take a break from just talking about like what characters can do and stuff like that, which I like doing.
It's my most asked and probably least favorite questions. What character would you like? But if I wanted to, I would just be writing that character.
Sure. Yeah. And you don't want to spoil your pitches too.
Yeah. Exactly.
No, but I think it's great for our listeners to get that the perspective on like, how does something go from like inspiration to like the tangible thing they're holding in their hand. I think that's really cool. So thank you for making time to talk about that stuff. My pleasure.
Yeah, people are never going to get an answer out of me for that one. What character would you like to write? Never.
I think it's smart. Just before I let you go, do you want to let people know about stuff that's upcoming or where they can find you online to follow you and stuff like that?
Sure. You can find me online pretty much on Twitter, which is the only social media that I use with any kind of diligence. I am also there on Instagram, but I don't nearly pay as much attention to it. Sure. In terms of upcoming stuff, considering we're on a DC-centric podcast, in terms of upcoming DC stuff, there's going to be a relatively big-ish announcement middle of this month. So everyone keep your eyes open for that one. In terms of already announced stuff, Aquaman Andromeda, which is the Black Label book with Christian Ward on art and Aditya Bidikar on letters. That one's coming out in June, which I'm very excited about. Everything I've seen on that book looks great. I'm very thrilled with how it's turning out. I'm so pumped
for that one. I'm a huge Aquaman fan, and I can't wait.
Yeah. I'm excited for people to see again just how weird we've gone with it.
Yeah.
Obviously, Swamp Thing was renewed for a season 2, quote unquote, which pretty much adds on 6 more issues. to what was initially a 10-issue season. And so that one continues. I'm quite excited about the direction where that's headed. There have been some Jack Hawksmoor hints and some Green Lantern hints. So stay tuned to that. I think that covers about everything on the DC side of things. I've got creator-owned books that are on their way. One at Dark Horse that will be announced soon, and potentially an Image project later in the year as well. That one will be co-created with Dan Waters, Sumit Kumar, who is my D-Saviture artist, and Lawrence Campbell of BPRD and Hellboy and fame. What else? Yeah, and then on the Marvel front, I am obviously continuing to write Venom and Carnage, and both of those continue to be interesting, exciting things to do.
That's awesome. Again, thank you so much for making the time. This has been great. I've really enjoyed talking to you and finding out about your process and all that
my
stuff.
My pleasure.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Oh man, Ram V, what a great guest.
Amazing.
Jeez.
Thank you.
Oh gosh.
So cool. By the way, thank you for running that errand.
Hey, no problem. It was really important. I know that you were out of Tic Tac, so
Yeah.
it was something that needed to be.
Yeah, specifically the fish flavored ones.
Yeah, from the ocean.
Yeah. Ocean tax. I can't believe I wasn't ready to vamp for 4 hours.
I mean, you did. It was great content. It'll never see the light of day.
That's for the Patreon, baby.
That's right.
Just 4 hours of me vamping to no one as a Patreon episode.
Yeah, you fucking listeners, you'll listen to anything.
Because we told you to.
That's right.
Yeah, thank you again, Rum. That was awesome. That was a ton of fun.
But now it's time to play everybody's favorite game.
All right. I'm ready.
Can you guess the name of a character based on someone who does not read comic books? Could describe that character to us.
All right.
You don't know how this game works. I send a photo of a DC character to my wife who does not read comic books, nor does she care for them. Oh my god.
Oh my god.
Oh my god. She sends back 4 clues describing what she sees. The doctor does not know who the character is. Are you ready to play?
I'm ready to play a game. Wow.
4 clues decide your fate.
You claim to be the doctor of DC. But this is one prescription you can't write for yourself.
Holy shit. Oh, that's good. Oh my god.
I mean, I'm not Jigsaw.
Oh my god. All right. 4 clues. Here we go.
Okay.
First clue is must do regular bikini waxes.
Okay. Well, it's certainly a very particular kind of costume. Starfire.
No.
Maxima.
No.
Jet.
No.
Or Gloss.
No.
Okay. Next clue.
Next clue has jaundice.
Mm-hmm. Huh. Okay, well, who are like yellow? Like the Dominators are yellow.
Mm-mm.
Durlans are kind of brownish.
You're
orange. Yeah, of course, obviously. Tomar Ray is like yellow, but I don't think he got a bikini wax. I don't know. Yeah. Oh wait, hang on. No. Queen Bee?
No.
Okay, next clue.
Next clue. Incredibly hairy shoulders.
Hairy shoulders.
Yeah.
Jaundice.
Mm-hmm.
Bikini wax.
That's right.
Atlas.
No.
Hercules.
No.
Samson.
Nope. Samson.
Hawkman.
Mm-mm.
Last clue, I guess.
Final clue. Fuck. Joker meets Hulk meets Captain Planet.
Joker
Meets the Hulk.
meets the Hulk. Oh, the Creeper.
That's right. It's the Creeper. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. This is the Creeper.
There you go.
Weird, hairy back shoulders.
Should have gotten it on the hairy shoulders.
Well, that's what I
thing.
figured. Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, frankly, I should have gotten it on the yellow skin thing.
There we go. That is the Creeper.
The Creeper. Jack Ryder.
God, you got another one. Another
I think
week.
that's 7
Ooh, I don't like
weeks
this.
in a row.
This is your head's
I
gonna.
haven't had a streak like this since we started the game.
Yeah. We gotta end strong. You know.
Oh my God. Are you letting me win?
Like you need the confidence boost.
Don't patronize me. Also, don't stop.
All right. Well, we would love to hear from you, residents. Were you able to guess the Creeper before the Doctor? Maybe you want to ask a question for one of the episodes coming up in the next few weeks. We've got Amethyst, Gem World
you can
episode.
ask about Princess Amethyst and Gem World and stuff like that. That's one episode, and
Or
then the other one is Justice League Unlimited, baby.
Oh my God.
Whoa.
Are we doing this? Nice.
Yeah, those are 2 episodes coming up. Next week's episode we've already done. By the time you're listening to this, that's with Heather Antos. We're talking about Green Lantern. But yeah, those other 2 episodes are coming, so send your questions.
You can send those to our Facebook,
Dr. DC Podcast.
our Twitter,
At Dr. DC.
Instagram,
Dr. DC Podcast.
email,
DrDCPodcast@gmail.com.
subreddit,
r/Dr_DC.
to our doc phone.
208-917-3238.
That's 28917-DCEU.
If you're nasty. Want to have a phone call?
10 cents an hour.
Do you accept the charges?
Accepting the charges means that you're going to be liable for.
This is one call you can't reverse.
There it is. Obviously, based on our references right now, you know that we're young and cool.
Yeah, we love Saw.
Yeah, so get on our TikTok.
At Dr. DC.
Go to our website if you dare.
DrDCPodcast.com or .ca.
You better give us a review or you're going to regret it.
Just not even thinly veiled anymore. Just a full threat.
Yeah.
Give us a review. Those reviews help us a lot, especially on Apple Podcasts. But if you give us a 5-star review and it's not on Apple Podcasts or Facebook, make sure you take a screenshot, send it to us, and we'll read it on the podcast.
Yeah, you better take a screenshot of it, send it to me in the next hour. Or you'll never see your family again.
Yeah, that's right.
Don't ask where they are. Would you like to review a podcast? Don't go in the other room. They're not there. Oh, shit.
Don't do it. Don't. No, man.
I know. I worked so hard on this.
I had the voice and everything. Why don't you send us a voice box to our email?
What?
Yeah, send us a...
Whoa. Sorry. What? Send us a voice box
Like
to
one of
our
those-
email?
No, to our regular mail. I meant physical. Send us physical mail. You can send us one of those like cool voice manipulator.
Oh, I thought you were. I thought you were
rip out your
doubling back
voice
to the
box.
phone, and then you fucked up voicemail.
No,
And I thought there was like a bunch of shit
No.
happening there.
I meant like one of the voice manipulator
modulator
boxes. Yeah, because
thing.
we
Yeah,
need
yeah.
a better one because we're not great at it.
Understand.
Send
Good
us
joke.
through the physical.
Yeah.
By explaining it, you know that's a good joke.
Totally. 301 Hogue Street, Hoge Street in Whitehorse, Yukon, Canada, Y1A1V8.
It's either Richard Eden or Reed Vanier.
Yeah.
Or what's that guy's name?
Voice box.
What's that guy's name?
What do you mean?
Jigsaw.
Yeah, Jigsaw. You couldn't remember
What's
his
my
name?
I forgot my name. I'm the jig who saws.
Oh my god.
I'm the one who saws.
Yeah.
Also, if you want great content like this off the main feed, you can subscribe to our Patreon.
Wow. Really stumbling across the finish line.
It's been a whole week of this.
Patreon.com/Dr. DC.
Smooth.
There's a $1, $5, $7 level. They all give you access to the Discord, which is our awesome Discord fan community. And at the higher levels, you get bonus episodes, videos, theme pools, all sorts of fun stuff. And it helps to support
us.
I like when you surf in and then trip just as you're trying to get off the board.
Yeah, well, that was opposite. I like fully drowned on my way out to the wave
sure.
and then got up on there and rode it home.
Got him in all the
Easy.
fanfic. If you want more filthy fanfic like that, why don't you go to our Ghostfacers podcast, all about Supernatural.
Yeah, Ghostfacers, a Supernatural rewatch, is our Ghostfacers podcast all about Supernatural. We're watching every single episode of CW Supernatural. We're into season 5 now.
Yeah.
We talk about real world monster lore and behind the scenes stuff about the show, and it's a ton of fun over there.
Yeah, so go to if you like Ghostfacers, check out Supernatural.
If you want a Ghostfacers podcast of Supernatural.
Yeah, if you want a Ghostfacers podcast, check out Supernatural. Listen to the podcast.
It's a Ghostfacers Supernatural rewatch called Ghostfacers, a Supernatural rewatch.
Yeah, 'cause if you don't watch Supernatural, it's weird to listen to the podcast.
Yeah, no, it's for everyone.
No, you
Stop gatekeeping.
no. But I've got this beautiful gate. I want it closed.
Good Lord. Thank you, Ram V, for joining us.
Sorry, this is how it
you're
ended.
welcome for not having to sit through this part.
Ciao, ciao.
Adios.
All the superheroes, they always fight for what is right. Live with danger and adventure, they are men of might.
This was a Brain Freeze podcast.
Want to play a game? Want to be on a podcast?
That's how we get kidnap their families and put them into torture chambers. Like,
If you don't record 90 minutes of DC content with us, your husband's jaw will be ripped off.